Saw dudes, the Yareli Prime dedicated build guide was just released and had a plethora of builds. All of them are amazing choices for steel path content, but there are a couple that are tailored to level cap content, which is the reason for today's video. Today's focus is on Loyal Merulina, which allows for multiplicative damage vulnerability scaling. As you can imagine, this works wonders in Void Cascade and is a perfect arena for Yareli Prime to go full on Sailor Moon. Let's get started. The Yareli build on screen was featured in the dedicated build video and utilizes Roar as the helmet ability instead of Aqua Blades. Corrosive Projection was used to strip some armor and make enemies more susceptible to damage over time from heat procs. Armor was a massive issue to deal with as seen in later footage. Power Drift increased ability strength alongside Umbral Intensify, which increased the effectiveness of C snares in Roar. Prime Continuity increased ability duration, which affected C snares from Yareli and Merulina, Roar's buff timer, and Riptide. Streamline granted ability efficiency, which reduced energy costs for casts, but more importantly, decreased the cooldown between Merulina's cast of C snares. Archon Stretch provided range to C snares, Roar, and Riptide, and allowed for energy refunding through the Panzer Build modded for electric damage. Vigilante Vigor and Fast Deflection decreased shield recharge delay and increased shield recharge rate for massively increased shield gating capabilities, allowing Yareli to abuse invulnerability windows from Merulina casts. Boreal's Hatred increased shield capacity and ability efficiency. As already mentioned, ability efficiency is paramount since it reduces the gap between C snares cast for Merulina with the Loyal Merulina augment. Loyal Merulina is an augment for Merulina that disables the riding function of the ability, but causes Merulina to periodically cast C snares with a 2-second cooldown at base between casts, shortened by ability efficiency. These bubbles inherit all of the stats from Yareli C snares. However, Merulina only casts one bubble at a time as opposed to Yareli's 5. The damage vulnerability debuff from Merulina is multiplicative to Yareli's for big PP damage. Roar is the helmet ability I chose to run with, since most of the focus of the loadout was to overwhelm enemies with heat procs from Kompressa Prime. Roar is treated as a universal Bane multiplier, so it effectively doubles the damage. Of course, this stacks with the damage vulnerability debuffs enemies are constantly afflicted by, so this makes heat damage or any application of damage over time incredibly strong. For the arcanes, I chose to run Molt Augmented and Arcane Precision. Molt Augmented further increased the effectiveness of both Roar and C snares for even heavier damage scaling. Arcane Precision was used to massively increase the damage of Yareli's secondary weapon, that being Kompressa Prime in this case. For better survivability through shield gating, I recommend swapping Molt Augmented for Arcane Aegis. For this level cap run, I used 3 Tauforge Crimson Shards, 1 Tauforge Emerald Shard, and 1 Tauforge Violet Shard. 2 of the Tauforge Crimson Shards were used for ability strength, to again increase the buff from Roar and the damage vulnerability debuff provided by C snares. The other Tauforge Crimson Shard was attuned for ability duration, just for better quality of life. The 1 Tauforge Violet Shard was meant to be a mini equilibrium, which massively helped with energy economy. This, combined with Archon Stretch, made running out of energy a non-existent problem. Finally, the Tauforge Emerald Shard increased the armor shred by a ton, increasing the heat damage that enemies take because we applied corrosive procs. Armor is a massive detracting factor for effective damage, so any extra defense shred is super welcome. The primary for this run was Bubonico and served as the primer for Kompressa Prime. The Bubonico's altfire possesses a very high status chance and respectable AoE size, making priming incredibly easy. Since it fires in a burst, it makes status application really fast. The most important elements on this build are Magnetic and Corrosive. Magnetic increases the damage dealt against Overguard, which is a major issue in higher levels, and Corrosive shreds armor. Primary Crux is used to increase ammo efficiency and status chance further. 1 to 2 bursts from the Bubonico is enough to drastically increase damage against Thrax using Kompressa Prime. I couldn't go to level cap without Yareli's signature weapon, at least this time around. The Kompressa Prime build is tailored towards applying as much heat damage as possible. Pistol Elementalist is essential on this build because it is a final multiplicative damage bonus, applied after Roar. You're probably tired of hearing the word, but these small nuances make all the difference in damage. For Kompressa, most of the damage comes from the AoE, so Galvanized Shot is not an option, hence the use of Hornet Strike. The rest of the mods serve to jack up multi-shot, status chance, and heat damage. I was running Kompressa as a crit weapon since it scales the damage of heat procs. For this, I used Prime Target Cracker and Secondary Enervate, which allowed for some juicy red crits. If you are heavy-handed with your trigger finger, I suggest swapping out Lethal Momentum for Pistol Ammo Mutation. I ran out of ammo one time in the run. The melee weapon I used was Praedos with the evolutions of Drifting Grace, Shockwave Synergy, Evolved Ascension, and Universal Readiness. Unlike many of my other runs, Praedos was used a fair bit. Riptide grouped up enemies very well, and C snares kept other enemies in place. Praedos isn't weak, but it has a higher time to kill because it needs to build a combo, unlike most other guns. However, with crowd control and damage amp that Yareli has, it made quick work of enemies in a pinch. It was especially useful when I ran out of ammo for Kompressa Prime. The Panzer build I went with is one of the standard ones I have shown in my other showcases. Viral Quills applies viral procs, but is a little redundant since we have Bubonico and Kompressa with innate viral damage. Martyr Symbiosis and Panzer Devolution allow us to have a get out of jail free card once in a while. Seismic Bond is arguably the most important mod here for Yareli, since it increases ability efficiency by up to 30%, capping out the stat at 175%, reducing the casting cooldown for Loyal Merulina to half a second. Merulina and Riptide are considered channeled abilities, fulfilling the requirement for the mod. Tenacious Bond increases the crit damage, and Reinforced Bond increases fire rate. These mods are essential for increasing Kompressa Prime's effective DPS. The rest of the mods are for quality of life, minus calculated redirection, which keeps Reinforced Bond active at all times. The Panzer Claw build is the same as usual. I use balanced posture to ensure all enemies were primed effectively. Shocking Claws drastically increases status chance and applies electric damage, allowing for the energy regen passive from Archon Stretch to proc. Bite increases crit chance enough to give us a crit damage bonus via Tenacious Bond. The rest of the mods increase the damage that the Panzer does and primes enemies for attacks from our weapons. Madurai is the focus school I used, as usual. Void Strike and Void Fuel were used to kill Thrax units with my amp more easily. Phoenix Talons does not have much of a place in this build since 90% of the damage output is from heat procs. However, it is still somewhat useful for Praedos since it is a primarily slash weapon. Power Transfer sped up the casting animations, which is nice for abusing Merulina's invulnerability gate. Sling Strength provided even more ability strength for Sea Snares and Roar, increasing damage once again. The amp I used was a standard 147, also known as a Certus Brace, Rat Black Prism, and Fat Scaffold. This is the amp that I always use in my runs, and I highly recommend you try it out. I use Magus Cloud, Magus Lockdown, Eternal Eradicate, and Eternal Onslaught as my operator arcanes. Let's talk about riding the waves. This level cap run was pretty alright, but there were some hiccups. Yareli's damage amplification was amazing, and was leagues above what I thought was possible. Without it, the run would have been incredibly hard. Let's begin with the good stuff. Sea Snares from both Yareli and Merulina were incredible at stopping adds in their tracks and making them wet toilet paper targets. Additionally, if the two separate instances hit the same target, they take even more damage, so Kompressa Prime, or any weapon really, hits like a truck. Merulina's spam allowed for great survivability, but it did have a learning curve. More about that in a bit. The invulnerability windows provided by the ability made it possible to take abuse in level cap, and weather through some of the oncoming hordes. Without it and the Loyal Merulina augment, I doubt I would have had the same success as I did in the footage. Kompressa Prime was a great single target and AoE weapon to a degree. Applying a ton of heat procs with a couple of rounds was nice for shredding Thrax or Eximus units. When going up against crowds, I essentially painted the walls with bubbles and waited for them to explode. This was a super laid back way to play and made quick work of hordes in lower levels. With Roar alone, enemies were usually dead within 5 seconds, if not primed or affected by Sea Snares. Okay, so time for the not so good. Sea Snares and Merulina are nice, but it's not incredibly often that the separate instances hit the same target, or even the target that I want. Let me give you an example. You are fighting 1 Thrax unit and 4 Grineer Butchers. If your Yareli casts Sea Snares, all of the enemies are guaranteed to get hit, assuming they are within seeking range. Merulina will affect the enemies with an instance of Sea Snares for the multiplicative damage bonus, but it may not choose to attack the Thrax unit first, which is incredibly annoying since that is the priority target. Even with a lower cooldown between casts, it's no guarantee that Merulina will attack the Thrax unit next. At best, it's something you have to work around and account for. While not a direct issue of Yareli, Merulina's casting sequence for invulnerability is something you have to watch out for. To get the invulnerability window, you need to recast Merulina and summon it, not just desummon. When first using Yareli, my issue was spamming Merulina a lot, so I would desummon it and lose the invulnerability window. That is a skill issue on my part, but when you're getting melted from all directions, you tend to panic click. And lastly, let's talk about Kompressa Prime. This gun is strong, but it had a delayed time to kill, which is incredibly annoying to deal with. The build used in the video had some issues that compound upon this. 1. The innate delayed explosion from Kompressa Prime. 2. The need to build up secondary enervate for a shorter time to kill. 3. The need to wait for heat procs to kill the target. This all comes after priming an enemy, applying Sea Snares, and possibly casting Roar if it already isn't active. It just slows down gameplay a lot, which is detrimental in a fast-paced game mode. If you're going to use a status-based primary, I would suggest something a bit more forward like the Bubonico, since it doesn't have a delayed explosion. That being said, can I recommend Yareli Prime? Yes, she's incredibly fun and effective, and makes almost all weapons very strong. While it wasn't highlighted in this video, Yareli has a ton of build diversity, which makes her pretty reliable even in level cap content if built around. That's part of the reason why I have a round 2 level cap showcase slated for her. Her use of weapons and abilities make her a fun frame to play, and allows for different forms of skill expression. As a final note, Yareli Prime is a fairly low investment frame. She doesn't have an exalted weapon and doesn't even need a ridiculous mod setup or forma dump. In my last video, I showed how successful she can be with just normal mods, and I stand by that. Just use the right weapons and you'll be just fine. Yareli Prime may have pissed off Ballast, but she won't do the same to you. I hope this level cap video helped. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thank you all for watching and happy farming. Stay safe.
Down an Exalizer, working on backup. Exalizer has been retired. Electrolyzer spent. Struggle has its benefits. on backups. This discovery might interest you. Spent Exilizer has been retired. Keep any rolling thrax away from that Exilizer until it discharges. That'll make us cascade. Exilizer spent. Exilizer spent. Down an Exilizer. Working on backups. Enemy bounty secure. Spent Exilizer has been retired. Cascade intensifying. Exilizer spent.
Your will was greater. This is good.